relationships, no matter what they are, personal relationships, general, whatever, are about skill, not goodwill. Everybody has
Oh, that's
goodwill,
perfect. That's good.
but they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have the skill.
Yeah.
And then sometimes even the quietness of somebody who doesn't have the words. Silence is also a language.
It starts right here. Start right here.
Hi, I'm Tom Rutledge. Welcome back to Start Right Here. I'm glad to be back here in the new year, 2021, with my good pal and co-host and partner in crime, the good Dr. Alan Berger. And we have a wonderful guest today that we've been really looking forward to having. And I'm going to let Alan say a little bit more about her. And you'll probably know more about how both of us feel about Mary, but than you ever wanted to know by the end of this broadcast here. But Alan, how you doing?
Well, Happy New Year. Happy
New Year.
Goodbye 2020. Hello 2021.
Mm-hmm. Learn from the past. Get the hell out of there.
That's it. And there's a lot to learn from that past. We just
God, absolutely.
A lot to learn. And I'm excited about this year. I'm excited about the changes that are going to be taken in our society and in our political system. I'm very excited about new possibilities and stuff like that, and see how this experiment proceeds at this point in time, but also excited about the rhythm that we have in our podcast, Tom. And I think we've had a lot of great shows in 2020, and I'm looking to a lot of better shows in 2021. And I couldn't think of a better way to start this year than to have our guest here today. And Mary Gordon, I'm going to let Mary tell you mostly about herself, but Mary and I met, probably 25 years ago, when you were the director of the family program over at that point, the Betty Ford Center, before Hazleton acquired the Betty Ford Center and they merged. And one of the great things that I saw that was happening at the Betty Ford Center was, from the beginning, the commitment to getting the family involved. Yeah. And you just did a fantastic job, Mary. I mean, families that went through treatment with you and worked with you and the staff, and you had a great staff. I mean, they just got so much value out of the experience they had, and you just were tremendous. You did a great job.
Thank you, Alan.
And then our relationship continued on. We've had a few misstarts. That one program we were trying to get off the ground with that startup, that didn't happen. And then, Tom and I, and the Thursday night meetings, and you make such as I was saying before we came on the air, what a great contribution you make on Thursday nights at the emotional sobriety meeting. So it's just great to have you as our first guest. But tell everybody about you a little bit more, what you're doing right now, things you're excited about in your life, and then we'll jump into 2021. And
okay. Well, first of all, Happy New Year to everybody. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that we're all here. We showed up for 2021.
So far.
Yeah, so far, so good today. And thank you for having me on with you guys. I feel that's a privilege, because I learn a lot from the two of you. But, I've been in the field over 3 decades, and got sober back in Maine, and also continued to work in the field, even though my background was, I was a music educator. And then I also I managed a company for a while, which is like a whole other story I'm not going to go into. But then cross country in 1999, moved to California to work at the Betty Ford Center. And my friends in Maine said to me when I got the job, well, first of all, we always feel like will they find out about me?
Yeah.
And now I turn that around and say, well, all the good things that we find out about ourselves in recovery and growth and all of that. But, and so, my work at the Betty Ford Center didn't start right with the director of family program. I worked in the outpatient program for a while, and then marketer for a while on the road, traveling all over.
That's right.
And did presentations with the likes of Dr. Garrett O'Connor.
Oh my.
And who I have some funny stories about sometime when we have but anyway, I had
Well, he was a jewel, though. What a gift
oh
that
my
Felix
God.
Garrett was. I mean, his sense of humor.
Oh my God. And he
You
was,
know, he really, to me, was the preeminent addiction psychiatrist.
oh, totally, totally. So that was, one of those little gifts I got, one of the many gifts I got from working there. And then, of course, Dr. James West, who you knew also, who wrote the book on, all you need to know about alcoholism. And I include that on my website because he's so dear. And just a little quip from him when I was working in outpatient, and we were all kind of clamored together about this one patient who just couldn't get it and was angry all the time. And we just said, this guy's angry all the time. Dr. West, in his calm doctor voice, said, well, of course he's angry. He's an alcoholic. And as soon as he said that, it sort of leveled the playing field,
Yes.
Like we weren't, like, where were we anyway?
Right.
Above it all or something, it just, anyway, he was a treasure. So then working in the family program over the years, I had that privilege. I had a fantastic staff, even when there was a changeover. I had smarter people working for me than me. And they were smarter in different ways, creative in different ways. And one of the things that I treasured about it also was we had this opening circle and we had this closing circle. We had a whole week with them, which was the gold standard at the time, in which Mrs. Ford and Susan Ford just really, they started this back way before me, of course, and they had other people doing the job. But they wanted to always have it include the family. And they wanted to, because of course, Mrs. Ford's intervention was a family intervention. And so one of the stories I would often tell the families was when Mrs. Ford would go up front to tell her story to all the patients. Everybody had their big book, and she would tell the story of how she got into recovery because her family did an intervention. And then she'd do the whole thing. And one day it was my job to bring her water and introduce her. After her talk and everything, she walked up the aisle with me and she said, "Did I do okay?" And I thought to myself, this is the woman that owns the Mrs. Ford, but that's the humility that she brought to the whole. So anyway, our family program, every once in a while, she would drop in or Susan Ford would drop in and either talk to the family or be in a circle with them. And that was a privilege. And then you also, Alan, I remember when you came to talk about emotional sobriety and to help to train my staff with the Gestalt here and now.
Yeah. And
I used that immediately after you left. I thought, this is what we're going to do. That was one of those, let's grab onto this right now. And
that's how we did training back then. As soon as somebody would show us something, we'd go like, okay, that's what I'm doing now. And then we would just do that for a while. That's how we learned.
That's exactly it. There was balking, there was people, and and I didn't know, but because I was learning too. But that's what I think is the treasure of working in this field. We stop learning, then we're really not any good to our clients or our patients or whoever. So anyway, I've been at it for a while, and then I stayed on after I retired in 2015. I stayed for another 4 years doing lectures over there, at least once or twice a month, and that was a lot of fun because I no longer had the position, the position,
right.
And so I had a lot more fun. I don't know, there was something that lifted off me. I didn't. And then after 4 years, they wanted to do everything internally, which was fine. And so that was the end of my, tenure there as a visiting lecturer. And so then I founded Inner Direction Recovery. But it started with the Woman I Am renewal retreats for women, which we did in the Valley here, Coachella Valley. We did in LA. And then my daughter and I joined together and provided a 3-day Woman I Am retreat in Canada.
Wow.
So that sort of started the ball rolling. And then we got the Inner Direction website up and started to provide services,
Well, tell us what happens in those retreats that you guys do.
Oh my gosh, we have so much fun. They're limited to about 12 women. And the women don't have to be in recovery from alcoholism. They could be in mental health recovery. They could be somebody going through a transition. We've had people who are cancer patients who recovered from cancer. So, and they come together to experience a feminine perspective of being together as women. So we did drumming, we did musical things, we did what I call edutherapy, where we had a circle, and we had the talking sticks circle. And and then we ate together, we broke bread together, and then there'd be a closing. And I mean, it was just powerful because they brought to the table all of their particular perspectives. And I was there to keep, I was the facilitator to keep it safe. And also to invite people to take some risks because, when it comes to drumming and dance, some people are very, they're inhibited in that particular place. And I always talk about the body. We store things in the body. And I'm telling you, some of the women would just weep after they would move and dance together. No words, just moving and dancing together. So it's a powerful experience, and each one is different. So
we've all had those experiences doing the facilitation thing of it definitely is the perfect example of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts.
Right.
And anybody who thinks what's going to happen when you gather people together for the purpose of healing, it's always a surprise.
It is.
It's
Totally.
that would be amazing to me. And I love that you and your daughter do that together.
Yeah, she prepared she likes to be kind of in the background, but she's like my angel or shadow in the background. And then she'll say, "No, Mom, that won't work." or this, so it's a beautiful thing. But the other thing, I like what you said, Tom, because, and you've experienced it too, I'm sure, Alan, over the times you've experienced retreats, but it's there's what we plan. And then there's how it bubbles up and what happens.
Yeah.
And what I'm really, really cognizant of when we're doing those retreats is that women's voices have not been heard or honored for various reasons over centuries, but certainly in recovery, I think it's important. Again, recovery from anything, that their voices need to be heard. So there were some people in there that had some things where they would step back and say, "I don't want to participate in this." They set their own boundary. So no one was required to do something that felt uncomfortable. But what I noticed, and I'm sure, again, you two are well aware of this, is when you give permission to people, or not even permission, when you allow that evolving of people saying no to a bound, or they don't want to participate, somehow that gives them permission to participate.
Right.
And then
they give them they don't know that they have the power to give themselves permission. That's what's happening. We're giving ourselves the power, but it's when we don't. Yeah, we're not there to tell people what they have to do. It's it's always been the simplest thing to me, but it's like when you listen to other people talk about this, it's like, in the name of being a tough love therapist or something like that, you hear people tell stories about, where they really felt like they were pushed into stuff. And I know I've done that in my earlier years when I was trying to figure out how to do this. Right. It's like, and people do wonderful stuff with it anyway, but it's like, it's so cool when you realize just to let people be and when you don't have to, you will.
Yeah.
Listen, what we're talking about has such a great application to life, doesn't it? Outside of the therapy room, it's just,
oh God, yeah.
The more supposed tos I have, the more agenda I have about how things are supposed to look, the less I can show up to what is happening.
Yeah.
And the more I'm going to miss incredible opportunities in my life that being more present to whatever is unfolding is going to afford me. So what we really capture in therapy is just such a powerful way of living our lives, and that's what we're finding in that emotional sobriety meeting on Thursday nights.
Right.
All those supposed tos, all those expectations, all those ideas how things should be, right, interfere with us coping with what is.
And I want to mention this because what is, and also in the books that I've read from you, both of you, is that self-respect piece in there. And you've mentioned it several times in your books about self-respect. Thom. And I think that's important for us as facilitators, or us as human beings, just respecting ourselves and our journey. And one particular real quick story about that, when I was back in Maine, I had several different jobs before I got my master's degree and was working in the field, was I was working at a domestic violence shelter. I was the sort of the manager of this shelter, and I was called out to pick up this woman. This was cold winters, a lot of snow in Maine. I had my 4-wheel drive Subaru to pick up this woman. And remember, I had years before been a music teacher in the schools. So I go out to pick her up, and the police were supposed to follow behind me. And so I pulled in my Subaru, all proud that I got there, you know, with a 4-wheel drive Subaru. And I'm waiting for her to come out of this little kind of cabin area, kind of rural, real wilderness kind of place. So all of a sudden, this guy comes right next to my window, great big strapping guy. And I thought, oh no, who's this? Well, it was her boyfriend. And I was supposed to pick her up. So I rolled down the window a little bit, and he looked in and he said, oh, Mrs. McGillicuddy was my name at the time. Miss Mick, you were my music teacher. And I said, yes, I was, Richard. And I'm here to pick up your girlfriend now. Oh, he says, oh, I'll go get her. I didn't say what for or anything, but it was that whole thing. Wow. You respect the process that he had, which was he recognized me, and it was like saved me from his possible wrath.
You saw him pulling you out of the car, didn't you, Marion? Kind of.
Yeah, that's right.
With you. That's right.
Self-respect, but respect for him too, you know. And and I remembered his name, which was a sort of a. I was younger then.
I can see it in his face. Patrick wants to say something.
Okay.
Oh, no, I just I've really been enjoying the conversation so far, and I just wanted to say I think it's important that you create that space for women to be with each other. You know, my girlfriend's in recovery, and you know, in the early days, and still sometimes today, she didn't feel safe, you know, unless she can be in a meeting just with other women. And and then I remember, you know, she has some domestic violence in her past, and you know, that was you know, she's actually a domestic violence advocate. So you know, that's so anyway, I just to the extent you could speak about that or some of your experiences could be really illuminating, I think.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. Yeah. That's beautiful.
It is so important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know what you said too, Mary, about how when I claim the right to say what I want, like I don't want to do that or I want to do that, that's where safety comes in.
Right.
When instead of waiting for somebody else to give me permission to do that, when I participate in setting those kinds of boundaries in my life is when I start to feel safe, rather than trying to regulate everybody else and get them to do what I want them to do to feel safe.
That's right.
It's when I say what I want or what I don't want, when I stand for what's, you know, I don't want to try that right now. And like you said, it's so important to create that room for people to say no.
Mm-hmm. And you know, as far as a movement for that, one of the things that we did in the retreats each time is we would form 2 lines where a woman would be, she would name herself and name other, maybe some of her ancestors or women who supported her in her life. And our job was just to witness her moving down through the two lines in a kind of a sacred way, you know, with drum beats in the background or some form of music. But that was always just to watch these women get in their own bodies, be comfortable in their body, and walk through that with other women and be honored. It's like, and we did that over at Betty Ford with women who had been abused. And Dr. Nancy Wade O'Brien was my supervisor at the time. And she would always work with the women who had sexual abuse, physical abuse, other kinds of abuses. She would always call me in to do the movement part with the women. She would do the educational pieces and the psychotherapy pieces, and then I would come in and do movement with them. So it's like the combination of the word and the analysis and the movement, body, mind, and spirit, you know.
You know, one of the things this is, I've done, I'm a massive introvert. You guys, we've talked about that before. 2020, staying away from other people has been no problem for me whatsoever. It's like I have thoroughly enjoyed just the being at home more and moving in and out and still getting, and I love the connection with the people. I love doing the work online and the connection, but it's like, you know, one of the things I realize I miss as you're talking about this is, and I think I was born a group therapist. I don't think I never meant to be a therapist, but it's like, I think I've always been a group therapist because before I even got into graduate school, before I ever got sober, I was, you know, a disciple of Irv Yalom and group psychotherapy. And I was just pouring through that stuff. And it's like, I love that. And then that evolved ultimately with all these other things we learned into these retreat settings and doing all that stuff. And I'm realizing as we're talking that I miss that I really miss from this year. It's like from doing retreats like that, where you can be in that same room. And specifically what's making me think that is I look forward to an opportunity I hope that we'll have, because I've heard you talk about your music. I've heard you talk about your movement therapy and stuff. I would love to be in a workshop where you're doing your thing and get to experience that with you. That would be so cool. And I love anything that brings our bodies into it, because and it's not because I have mastery over that, because I have been one of the most self-conscious human beings on the planet since I hit adolescence, and you know, still work on that today. But I have learned to take chances, and they always pay off. It's like, you know, especially when I'm in safe places with people I trust. So I can't wait to see more and feel more and do more with that with you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of men in movement, one of the things that, and this is Dr. Garrett O'Connor was included in this. We both went to British Columbia, and we're at that great big hotel up there, which I forgot the name of right now, to a lawyer's assistance program conference. Mm-hmm. And my job was to present about the difference between men and women in treatment. And it was so looking back at it now, you know, I thought, oh my God, it was like a flip chart instead of, you know, what we're doing now with slides and all that. And I had it, and there was a big group of men. It was mostly men. It was a lawyer's assistance program. And then at the end of it, I closed with music. And I did a movement where I included them in the movement by moving around the room and everything. And I had chosen Sarah McLachlan, and I didn't know she was Canadian. I just chose this big piece of music, you know, and it was, Will You Remember Me? I Will Remember You, or something like that. Anyway, so afterwards, these lawyers came up to me and said, oh, thank you for playing Sarah McLachlan from Canada. And I thought, I didn't even know she was from Canada.
You're welcome.
And then I know, and I did. And then Dr. O'Connor comes up to me and says, oh, you're such a show off. That's good. And it was so delightful to hear him say that. You know, sometimes you take offense. I didn't take offense to him because I knew him well and I loved him, and he was brilliant. And he also was Irish, right from Ireland. And he had that brogue. So I just feel like anybody who works in this field. I
have a Garrett O'Connor story. So I was presenting with Garrett one day.
Okay.
The IDAA, International Alcoholics Anonymous. He was big on that, and I think it had a lot to do with the inception of that program. Well, definitely supported it, loved it. I thought it was a great place for docs to come. So I remember this presentation he's given, and in the beginning of it, he shows this warm and fuzzy film where everybody's talking about love and supporting one another, and only the way Garrett could do this. I mean, he gets the room just so open and vulnerable, right? And at the end of the film, he goes, that is so much crap. he goes, look, there's nothing wrong with that side, but let's own the other side of it. Every one of you are a goddamn Hitler, or he hated the Prime Minister of England.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. What was her name? I'm blocking her name right now. Oh, he could not.
Thatcher?
Yes. Oh my God, he could not stand Margaret. And he put Margaret Thatcher up on the board with Hitler. I mean how much he hated Margaret Thatcher. And he says, this love and crap is great, but and that's what he did in the beginning of class. He says, I want to see the hands of all the guys that have been to a massage parlor. Right. So these are all medical doctors, right? So in the group, about maybe 10% of the group raised their hand. Yeah. And he says, and look, you guys, 10% of you raise your hand, you're liars. He goes, probably 60, 70% of you have been in a massage parlor since you've been in sobriety, and you're not owning it. Because what everybody does, nobody wants to deal with that other side, the shadow side of them. Everybody wants to talk about love. That's right.
That's right. You got to own both sides.
Oh, and he was big into that. And I'll tell you,
he was.
And then at the end, he says, all right, now, that's what it was. It wasn't just massage. He says, if you've abused your partner verbally or, and all this other stuff. And then he says, and then at the end, he says, now raise your hands again. 90% of the room had their hands up.
That's right.
In terms of owning it and stuff like that. I mean, that's who he was. And he did it without shaming. It wasn't that he was just saying that this is a side of us that we got to own. He goes, I hate to tell you, I got a Margaret Thatcher inside of me.
Yeah.
It killed him to say it. I mean, he goes, I got a Hitler inside of me. He goes, I understand that evil. That evil exists in me. And thank God I've done the work where I'm dealing with it now. He says, but if you don't start to do that work, it's going to get you.
Yes.
It was so good. I mean,
you're landed on something that takes us into 2021 here, because we're pinballing stories, but I know a fella that I won't say his name because it won't look good for him, but it's like, in my opinion, he does these retreats for, and all these gatherings for these corporate, big cheese corporate guys. And they deal with, it's all kind of a part of it kind of came out of the men's movement that we've been involved in. You and I've talked about some, Alan, but it's all about these guys' woundedness and it's like, and I get it. We do the longer version sometimes. Sure, they're wounded, but we're talking about privileged people, and I would be working at the facility sometimes and see these guys come in, and they would, they'd be sitting there smoking big cigars and, I knew their agenda and I knew his agenda, and they were going to talk about woundedness. And I just told him one time, I said it sincerely. I said, listen, if you ever want somebody, and this actually fits into what we're getting ready to do with 4-step stuff too, I think, Alan, in the Thursday group, is like, I said, if you ever want somebody to come in here and just spend like a couple of hours talking to these guys about how to basically be in touch with the asshole within them and how to learn what assholism recovery is, because we've all been assholes, and I said I would love to come in and talk to them about that stuff. It's like, you could have heard that drop on the ground when I said that to him. It wasn't going to happen. He was making his reputation on helping these people with their woundedness, but that's the deal. Isn't that the thing that makes the difference between what's real and what's not real in this stuff? It's not, some of the hardest work I've ever done. The hardest thing I have ever done in my recovery was, I remember when Bedford Combs had me in this piece of work where I had to say to that inner child that I had accidentally just met, and I had to say, I didn't have to. He said, say, I am the parent that you've always been waiting for. Yeah. So, of course, I didn't say that because my mouth wouldn't move, and my heart broke, and I sat there for I don't know how long. And then when I finally squeaked it out, and I cried for 20 minutes in the fetal position. It was the hardest thing in the world, and it's such a turning point for that. And so anyway, that's just to say, all of that is real. That is the most powerful metaphor that I've ever worked with in this stuff. But the other part of this, getting on with this stuff, is owning our shit. And getting that, look at that shadow side, look at this stuff, and understand that I love what Sheldon Kopp says in I think it was Back to One, which I never heard him say it, so I've added the inflection in my mind, but it was for everybody who's ever worried that your parents are in you, relax. They are, it's like, it's like, and you think about the things that I hate about each of my parents. I get the good stuff, but those are that's my dark side. I can be as shame-filled as my dad. I can be as depressed and mean and bitchy and horrible as my mom. It's like I've done it. It's like, and those are the things that make, and as we move forward, as we're polarized in our world, we have to learn how to get out of that polarization and realize we all have to be able to look at our whole self.
Right. Both sides. And that reminds me of, and I'm glad you said that, because when we do the women's retreats, there's a song that we use, and actually Eddie helped me with this. It was something he had done, where you honor the genius in me loves the genius in you. The genius in me loves the genius in you. So easy to love. Then the asshole in me loves the asshole. So that's what we're talking about. We have both sides. And I'm going to tell you, women sometimes have a hard time owning that. Yeah. Because we want to be nice. We've been conditioned. But then there are women who have no trouble with that. Mm-hmm. But I always bring that up, the two sides, the shadow side and the other side too. And then, I wanted to say,
and then with you, they get to sing it. That's so cool.
They get to sing it, and it almost like, they're startled that they, because they can do it with a partner, and they're like, I just said that, and it just seems to be easier to own when you're singing it.
You're just, I don't talk Milton Erickson, whatever you want to talk, but it's like you're disrupting so much stuff in their head when you're doing this in song. I think sometimes I end up doing it because I laugh at so many things that other people don't laugh at. And it's like, I think sometimes that just throws people off, and it's like, but when you can get to those places where your brain is doing different things, then you would, there's no way you ordinarily sing about your asshole within you. It's like, until you're there. Yeah.
This may be a nice segue into, I think, something that our country is going to be struggling with so much this year is, how do we heal the incredible divisiveness that currently exists? And it's such a serious problem. We've gotten, we were polarized. I grew up, I was born in 52. So I grew up through the 60s and 70s. And I saw the incredible polarization that occurred between, the peace and love movement and Vietnam War, and the polarization around that. And the challenging of a lot of that the power, the white power in the society. It really, that dialogue started, I think back in those days and stuff, and and I thought we had made some movement, and to my ignorance was the not realizing how still polarized we are, because I hang out with like-minded folks like you guys, right, who are much more in understand what we're like, stuff we're talking about today, and all of that. But I think we've got an incredible challenge. Do you guys have any ideas about what we might do to start moving towards addressing that, personally and then socially? And
well, I think one of the things we got to do is what we're talking about here, which is and it's something that I write about in my therapy for politics stuff that's on my website. It's like we have to practice the principles that we practice, and I don't mean just as addiction addicts recovering, but just as I like the idea of what Mary's talking about from the beginning. It's like I thought about when you've talked about Mary being in charge of a family program. I thought nobody better, because I just have this sense about you, Mary, that it's like you don't distinguish. It's like, the idea that I have alcoholism, that person has an eating disorder, the other person is been traumatized by cancer treatments. It's like, and that's one of the gifts I think, Allen, that you've given me by helping me to focus on the emotional sobriety concept, because that's the big common denominator. But the most one of the most important common denominators in the whole recovery thing is always start on your side of the street.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so easy. And what I've struggled with is when people get to where they're, where they're so different from me that I can't even identify anything to come close to agreeing about. It's like, and maybe not even respecting. It becomes a real problem. And it's like, and I just really, this sounds corny, but I listened to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talk the night they accepted the nominations, and it's like, I really take this healing thing for seriously.
Yeah.
And I want people to know, we have to look at ourselves, it's about communication. That's one thing. And the other thing is, it doesn't mean people go like, oh, well, we're going to let everybody off the hook. Healing doesn't mean letting other people off the hook.
No.
It doesn't mean that. It's like, it's like, no, it means we're not just going to think that change is going to happen outside of ourselves.
Right.
It has to start with us.
Right. Yeah. And what I want to add to that, Tom, is that, the listening, I think the listening
Yes.
is going to be important for us as listeners, and listening to people that we probably ordinarily wouldn't, I personally might react to. Mm-hmm. And react to, not in a way that would be healing, but in a way that would be, don't you know you're wrong, mm-hmm. kind of way. Mm-hmm. So I think that the communication of skills, but also the ability to be quiet, be peaceful in ourselves, and that's emotional sobriety too, is just say, oh, okay, let me listen to this. Doesn't mean I'm not going to say something right when they're finished, from my point of view, or how I would look at healing. Mm-hmm. But I think that we just as a country need to listen to each other, and what are the deep-seated prejudices that we all have, or we call that sometimes the old ideas, the old beliefs. Who have we talked to lately that has a different opinion than us, or has a different way of looking at it?
Well, the best people that I've ever talked to about stuff like this always talk about, first of all, I'm a big believer that curiosity is the primary ingredient in respect. You got to be interested, and that's the opposite of assumption. But the other is people that are smarter than me and wiser than me and communicate better than I do, that I kind of model for myself, are people who basically can stay in that really curious interview mode, with people, as opposed with and kind of hold out, because I've gotten pretty good at that, but it's like, I'm very much aware of the guy on my committee who's ready to come in, and he's over there making the notes and getting ready for it to make his counterpoints, and it's like, and I gotta go, that's fine. He's there. It's like, you go like, no, it's not your turn. We gotta listen. And the people, what I was going to say before is, I've heard people say so often, listen for people's value systems. It's like, because the values are not that different. Right. We assign different, we have different representations for the values. It's like, but when somebody says, oh, you're taking our freedom away, I just want to go like, oh, no, we're not. We're doing, you are, so are not, but that's not going to get it. We have to listen. Tell me more about that.
Right.
Oh, and I wanted to say,
that is one of the things I do hear. And I'm much more on the left. I wouldn't say I'm radical left, but I'm definitely left. And when I talk to some people that are on the right side, is things like, my God, they're so afraid of losing the democracy.
I know.
You'll hear that theme come up, and I'm sitting there going, my God, what's going on now seems like a threat to the democracy, right? Mm-hmm. Wanting to disenfranchise the votes of millions and millions of people, just to continue to keep one person in power. But they see it they don't see that. For some reason, that doesn't end up on the radar for them. But the fact that we might go towards more of a socialistic society is going to somehow take away the democracy and their personal freedom. Same thing with mask wearing. Mm-hmm. It comes down to this thing. No one's going to tell me what to do. I have a personal freedom to not wear that mask. And anybody that tries to dictate that to me is taking away my individual rights.
But Alan, one of the things that and I'll say this briefly, because I know that Patrick wanted to talk too, is like the you and I have talked about how doing couples work, and to me, everything we need to do in communication is right there in our therapy room. It's like that we look for. You called it something else, but same thing. I called it points of agreement. You know, we're going to find these points of agreement, and so one of the points of agreement is when you're talking about people at very extreme ends, is we both fear for loss of our freedom. We both fear for our loss of the democracy. We both want we want to have freedom. We want to have choices. We want to, feel safe. All those things, we have all that in common. And it's like, that's a starting point for conversation.
Right. Patrick, what were you going to say?
Oh yeah, no, thank you. I was going to say that across the spectrum, I think everybody's material well-being is going to be, has been and will be, extremely adversely affected in 2021. And so I think, where therapy and, mental health resources can come in is, in the absence of that, like dearth of, maybe help isn't on the way, or it's going to be a little while before a lot of people, they can turn their heat on, they can get groceries, they don't have to go out and work during a pandemic. But, I think that emotional sobriety piece and the absence of that, of just trying to find some space of wellness within a kind of dire circumstance could be a big help. That's where I think, your guys' skill sets would come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, underlying everything is fear.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who's.
That's what I hear.
It's just fear.
I'm hearing, Mary. There's a lot.
And uncertainty. And I mean, I think about this past year with the pandemic, of course, so much uncertainty. But even before that, we've always lived with uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's just that it brings it to a head when
we lose. Yeah. When something bad happens, we lose the illusion of certainty.
Exactly.
I finished Embracing Fear with my HarperCollins book right at the time. It was in the final editing phase when 9/11 happened.
Okay.
So we were dealing with fear stuff. So one of the things, we went back to the table and tried to decide, do we want to do we need to now, we lived in a different world. We had to change some things about the book. It's and we decided ultimately, I'm glad we didn't want to turn it into a post 9/11 book that's about the fear of that. But we did need to get that historically into the book, that this is what was happening. And it's like, and that's what I ended up doing lots of interviews on. It's just about how everybody lived in that uncertainty. And and it's all, I've seen it all come back. I see it come up with things like the school shootings. We habituated to that, unfortunately, as a population. But I remember Katrina. I worked with a lot of the folks who came up here from Nashville from Katrina. After all that, we as human beings, we wake up in the midst of a catastrophe, right, and the very best of us shows, and then we go back to fucking sleep, and the very worst of us emerges. It's like this is different. It's like all the same. I'm seeing the same stuff with the fear stuff that I wrote about and put out there back in those days, and see all that being as relevant as ever. But the fact that this has lasted so long and continues to last, and I think that's an important thing for all of us to say. People, it's still going on. Put your mask on. Right. It's like it's just because help is on the way doesn't mean it's safe out there, because it's not. But right. But I'm hoping that there's going to be something different. That we've been in a process long enough to where there's going to be some things that have changed, and that we really can work on helping, well, first of all, ourselves, and then other people to hold on to the lessons learned. I've been calling this the involuntary international COVID, values clarification retreat. I don't know what the acronym for that is, but it's like, but talk to people. People learn and have been learning for this last year. And it's like, now we got to remember. Now we got to not forget and remind each other. It's so important, and it's really an opportunity.
Right, and it's easy to forget.
It's natural for us to forget.
It is natural. Yeah. It's almost like, wait a minute. Didn't just a few months ago we have COVID, and you ended up in the hospital, and that's the reminder that at least personally, that I do with my husband.
Yeah.
And that we know of other people with
Mhm.
COVID or who've had
Mhm.
COVID or
Mhm.
lost their life to COVID. And yeah, so we do have incredibly short memories.
Well, it's important that when you said that, though, it's also important for us to should not turn that into and this goes to recovery stuff. It's like that's human nature. We habituate to anything. The hum of the refrigerator.
Right.
We used to have goats. We used to have goats out on our farm, and they would butt the back of the house with their horns when everybody was inside, and they didn't get to come in. And that's fairly loud when you have two goats on the back porch butting the house. It's like, but Dee Dee and I habituated to that. So people would be over to see us, and they would go, "What's that?" And we go like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then we tune in and you hear this loud sound, and it's like, and so that's natural. But it's what I've been saying for AA forever is like, we don't need better memories. We just need a life full of reminders,
Yes.
and that's what we are to each other. We're like each other's Post-it notes.
Right.
It's like, how often do we say something to be supportive about recovery that's a brand new original idea? It's like, we just say it again. Yeah.
And then listen, here's the other part of this, and it's kind of we tapped into it earlier when we talked about is that there's a lot of things I see on the other side that just appall me. But when I step back, can I say, do I see any of those characteristics in my behavior at any time in life?
Yes.
And the answer to that is yes. Tom knows. He's taken my inventory. So he's
I'm taking it now.
but it's this thing that if the first person that hasn't committed to sin can throw the stone, right? And
Right, that's
no
right.
one amongst us that can throw that stone. I mean, look, thank God some of it hasn't been as egregious and hasn't hurt and damaged as many people as some of the behavior that we've seen. But have I hurt people I loved and cared about because of my self-centeredness? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Has my narcissism showed up in my relationships and damaged some of them? Of course it has. So that's the other part, is my ignorance played, wreaked havoc in my life. Have I thought I was right at times when I was terribly wrong?
Right.
Well, yes. I mean, so, that's the other side of this thing, is that we've got to start just, and what, like you said, Tom, that doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
It just makes it understandable and maybe creates, before you said about leveling things out, Mary, right? Maybe it just creates an experience or a leveling out in the relationship that we don't have to talk about who's right or wrong. We could just try to understand, what is important to one another and how, there's some real big differences in terms of how we achieved some of these things.
And I encourage people to take everybody's inventory because it's good practice for taking your own.
It is. Really, that's a great way to say it.
I like
it. We discourage
something in you. I got it too,
Right. Right. No, that's a great way to say it. Right. That's right. I wrote about this a lot in about projection is such a powerful mechanism, is that the stuff in me that I don't want to look at, I'm going to definitely attribute to you.
Yes.
It's a great way of thinking about it, is that I set that boundary way too much in my favor, right? In terms of having those characteristics or attributes. And of course you have them, but I don't have them. And that's that holier than thou, crap that just polarizes a relationship and makes it impossible for people to find that ground where they can start talking about this stuff beyond right and wrong.
And the other thing about that too, instead of polarizing, sometimes when, whether it's couples or groups, people are taking each other's inventory. And then there's a moment of like awareness, and then there can be laughter, which is healing. It's like, there I go again. It's that self-awareness, and you talk about self-respect, Tom, and it's, and you're always talking about the possibilities, Allen, and, turning away from and turning to, all the things that help us in our growth. I mean, I think laughter is one of the things that really is, the ability to laugh at oneself is growth.
Well, true humor is about perspective.
Yes.
I mean, if you think about that, what do the best comedians do? They just describe things that we all are familiar with. And when we go like, oh man, that happened to me just yesterday. But and I can't remember which one of you just said this, but this is exactly, I just love the genius in both of you. And I should have sung that, I realize now, but I think I like the idea of us. I like the idea of the four of us sitting here right now on this podcast. This may sound like this is going to be arrogant, but I don't mean it that way, because I think lots and lots of people need to be doing this. We need to think about what are the kinds of conversations we might be able to have that can be healing. Now, it's going to happen slowly. It's going to happen gradually. It's not going to happen all at once. See, I want to fix it, but I also know my fix it guy has to stay on the sidelines most of the time, because he usually makes things worse.
Right.
But one of you said something about the idea we need to have conversations in which that are very strictly not about agreement or disagreement. We need to find things to talk about. I mean, hell, if we had to on the fly just come up with a program, we would say, okay, well, let's give us some people from both ends of the spectrum, and we're gonna make some real serious rules here, and there's going to be rules about what topics you can't talk about, and we're going to just go in there and we're going to have conversations, and we're going to get these people to know each other as human beings.
Yes,
it's like, and that's it. If that's all I would have to contribute to that, and we could go in there, but that would make a difference.
Yes.
Well, it would. And look, that experiment's been done. So back when desegregation took place, right, they had a real serious problem, because there was so many stereotypes, right, in these white communities, in busing in kids of color, right, black kids or brown kids or whatever it was going to be, and they hired. And I don't think many people know this, but Dr. Aronson, I'm blocking his first name right now. He was a sociologist. And they said, look, we got a serious problem here. We're going to be putting these groups together that have never mixed. And what do? They're so polarized in that there's such a concern about the violence that's going to follow.
Right.
What can we do to start to help them blend better, right? To start to get to know each other. And so what he did was exactly what you said, Tom, is he said, so the thing you need to do is you need to focus the classroom activities on small group projects. And the criteria for forming a group is that you're with someone that you wouldn't be in the group with normally. Mm-hmm. So the teacher had to compose all these groups. And then what they did is they worked on things together. And as they worked on things together, and they were non-controversial things, like we're going to build a log cabin or whatever it was going to be. And what started to happen was they saw that, you know what, this other kid's a lot more like me than I've ever imagined it to be.
Right.
And it started to create this incredible experience of going beyond stereotypes, from just hanging out together in a group with a common project in mind.
Right.
We're going to talk about this. We're going to focus on this. We're going to do this for this particular activity or whatever it was going to be. And the effect of that was phenomenal. The amount of fear that there was generated at first about putting these groups together and the kind of violence that was going to take place. Not saying that there wasn't, and not saying some kids didn't get bullied and stuff like that. That happened too. And I'm not wanting to minimize the pain that anybody had over that stuff. But that's an interesting, I had another thought I wanted to share with you guys. Is it possible that what we do when we take a particular political position on what's right or wrong is that it's largely influenced by trying to reverse something from our past? In Gestalt psychology, what we say is that we are very actively involved all the time in organizing our perception and giving meaning to the experience we have. It just doesn't happen, right? We are constantly giving meaning to whatever is happening at any particular moment in our life. And that meaning is influenced by like so many different things, right? But mostly influenced by your emerging needs at the time. So, for example, if somebody was disempowered, they're going to move towards some kind of an organization or political position that would give them what? Power, right? That they are going to get, look towards something like that. That may be one way to get to what we're looking for, right? In terms of trying to understand in a very deep way some of these differences that we have in terms of how come we identify with this and how come we move in that direction or not, is that we're all trying. Like for me, one of the things I love about the Democratic Party when it's operating in my opinion in a great way is that it's responsive to the needs of most of the people. Is that it's really listening or trying to listen to. And that's been the big criticism of when the Democratic Party doesn't do well, is it loses touch with people, right? Because it's, so much been, in my opinion, the People's Party, is the way that we've thought about it. But that because of my experience growing up is, not being able to be anybody listening to me when I had pain over my dad's death and all of those different experiences, that seemed so appealing to me, right? That was moving me in such a great way. But it's a very interesting way to look at this stuff, It's almost like political psychology, right?
No, it's good. What I wrote down was political views, understanding political views from the point of view of an origin story from your personal history. Right. It's like no, it makes a lot of sense. And we wouldn't, we have to be careful not to make assumptions, because we'd say two people can have the exact same experience and they can end up two different things. But again, this goes back to values. It's like, okay, what's the common value they have? This one turned out to be this very right-wing person, this very left-wing person. It's like, but they had a similar story, and they both both experienced a loss of control, and this is what they believe is going to because that some of that's there. I mean, it's like we're not, we'd lose a lot of people if we tried to tell them that's where all our political views come from. But it's like we don't ever stop being ourselves. So that's
right. And adding to that, the conversation about how do we do this beside listening and in extra communication and examining taking our own inventory is also getting out of our own comfort zone. So going someplace, being with people we don't ordinarily mix with, and listening, and then listening for what's the common thread here? What do I have in common? Humanity, of course, with these people, the people so I just think small steps like that can help in the healing and in the understanding of where, doesn't mean, again, everybody's going to agree, but there could be a little more compassionate view of, what's happened here.
Yeah, and at the very least, it turns the heat down, I mean, not otherizing people with different opinions.
Exactly.
And getting a sense of the intent behind it, I think might, have some long-term constructive outcomes, that we don't foresee yet, but might help.
Yeah, that's good.
Patrick, intent is really an important word there. Positive intention. And we again, one of my favorite things to do is to connect this to all the stuff we do intrapersonally, and in the same dynamics out here. It's like even if I look at my asshole should monster that told me to be never try something because I was going to be a failure no matter what. I discovered along the way a positive intent. He was protective. It's like, this is a part of me who didn't believe in me and believe, here's how you save yourself from being harmed and from being devastated. You're never going to be run over by a bus if you stay out of the fucking street.
Yeah.
Don't ever go there. It's like, lay down, it's like, so I would lay down on the ground to demonstrate this and just lay on the floor and just say, from here, I don't have very far to fall. It's like, that's what that should monster was doing. His intent was right. Don't risk it, Tom. It's like, so we do need to listen for that. And one of the things that I want all of us to think about is coming out of this conversation today too, is think I'm trying to think, because I'm thinking practically, how do we do this? It's like, I think we have to find ways to model it.
Yeah.
Right.
So especially if it's about doing things like this, where we're having conversations. So some way that people can hear conversations that they can identify with. And even if it's maybe interviewing people from, this is an idea I had a long time ago about politics, is, facilitating interviews between very directly opposing people, and have them come together with some stuff like that. But you have to show people how to do this.
Right.
And by definition, at this extreme, we don't even know how to do it.
Exactly.
We have ideas about it, but it's like we need to figure it out and experiment, and yeah.
And one of the things that we would always say to families, and that I always say to clients, is relationships, no matter what they are, personal relationships, general, whatever, are about skill, not goodwill. Everybody has goodwill.
Oh, that's perfect. That's good.
But they don't necessarily have the skill.
Yeah.
And then sometimes even the quietness of somebody who doesn't have the words. Silence is also a language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not bad. It's not something.
Well, I say it all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as no communication. We're
Right.
communicating all the time. And sometimes silence is saying a lot.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Right. God, I love that skill, not goodwill.
This has been great, Mary. It's so great to still stay connected with you through all of this and keep these dialogues going. And
It's one of the things that I'm grateful for 2020, because I've gotten to know both of you, so well, and you too, Patrick. It's like I mean, this whole world we're in right now would not exist without all that's happened. So I am grateful.
If we had a normal year last year, Tom, none of this would have gone down. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't have started the coping with COVID, those 12 videos.
Mm-hmm.
That's what started the thing, and then. Mm-hmm. While that was going on, I decided to start that Thursday night meeting, and you became an important part of that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing led to another.
Yeah.
We started, and we invited Patrick in to help us record the thing.
Because we didn't know what we were doing.
Patrick, he's a youngin', and he's into all of this technology.
Yeah.
And he's just been godsend in terms of helping us achieve our mission, which, a shout goes out to you. And thank you for all the hard work, Patrick, that you put into this thing. And just, right, Tom, mm-hmm. I agree with you. I was sitting there reflecting the other day, is that as much as I've lost, I've probably gained more this last year. Yeah. It's one of those amazing things, by just showing up and looking at what's available and then appreciating what is that we've been able to build this. We've been able to, I finished that book with Dan that I've been trying to get finished forever. And then wrote another whole book during COVID. I mean,
wow.
I've never written another book that fast in my whole life.
It's full circle. We started early in the podcast. I think we talked about positive opportunism, which is something I started talking about and writing about right after the 9/11 thing, which is living by the question, how can I use this horrible situation to become a better person?
That's right.
And building community is such a part of all of this, and that's what we're talking about.
And you hear it, like we've gotten as many as 150 people on that Thursday night meeting now.
Sometimes.
I know it. I've seen it.
And you hear people talk about, my goodness, this is what I've been waiting for in my recovery. I mean, I'm loving this. This has added such a breath of fresh air for.
It's really cool.
And we've all created that, you guys. You guys have had a hand in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Sure.
Thanks for coming on, Mary.
You're quite welcome.
We'll have you back soon, I hope.
Of course we will.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Keeping your heart, start right here. That's where it starts. Right here. Won't you look to your heart? It's always an